Hello, everyone. It's your girl Miracle Sims, and you're watching the GSL Talk Show. Tonight, we're going to be chatting with Miss Leanna Wolfe, and she's going to share all about her provocative life and books. So stay tuned.
That I'm not the type of girl that goes. Yeah, it's a miracle, baby. Wishing I would have a one night affair.
Welcome back to the GSL Talk Show. I'm here with Miss Leanna Wolfe. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Actually, my name is Dr. Leanna Wolfe.
Oh, my apologies. My apologies,
No
Dr.
problem.
Leanna Wolfe.
Hey, it's cool.
Yeah, I like to give people their props and, their accolades now. My apologies. Yes, Dr. Wolfe. Could you share with us where you're from and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm from California. I actually grew up in Palo Alto. That's now the home of Google and Facebook.
Hmm.
And at the time, it was um, a little town adjacent to Stanford University, and
Mhm.
it's grown a lot, and I no longer live there. It's extremely expensive. It's in the thick of Silicon Valley. I live
Um,
in Los Angeles, and um, yeah, so that's kind of where I'm from. My training is in anthropology as well as sexology, and
um,
I've had the privilege of living in many different parts of the world to do research. And
mm,
so my book that I'm motivated to go on podcasts such as yours is called 177 Lovers and Counting: My Life as a
mm.
Sex Researcher.
Ah, nah. Well, awesome. Yeah, I mean, we got to learn all about it. I was going to ask you too, it sounds like you're in Silicon Valley, but you already confirmed that and everything. I've only been out west
I
a
was.
couple of
I'm
times.
no longer. I'm in Van Nuys in the thick of the San Fernando Valley, which is part of Los Angeles.
Yeah. I remember the Burbank area being pretty nice, and then
Yeah,
I
we're
got
not
a
too
sister
far
who
from Burbank. Yeah.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay. I've only been out there a couple of times, but it was
Yeah.
good. The only thing was that traffic.
Yeah, we got traffic.
Oh
But
my
I've been to where
goodness.
you live in Georgia, and there's traffic there too.
It is. You're right. You're right about that. If
Mm.
I just remember the first time sitting in LA traffic and feeling like I was just sitting in a parking lot. I'm like, this is crazy. But it could get like that,
Yeah,
yeah, in Atlanta
it is
too.
pretty
So
crazy. That's why there's podcasts and
yes,
radio
yes.
and books on tape and whatever else.
Right. You don't want to go anywhere. Let's just stay home.
Mm.
Oh my goodness. Well, awesome. I mean, well, we have to hear about your world travels and of course this book and everything like that. So, feel free to share.
Sure, sure.
I think well it was funny because I mean I don't know if that was a between me and you thing, but you were saying that you didn't necessarily feel like, we were a fit, but then you mentioned that you're a sexologist. Am I getting that title correct?
Yeah, I'm a sexologist. I have a doctorate in
Mhm.
sexology, and I
Oh,
earned it, God, 21 years ago. Um,
wow.
through a place called the Institute for Advanced Study of Human Sexuality. And
Mm-hmm.
I did my dissertation on polyamory and jealousy.
Oh,
And so I don't know how much your show talks about polyamory, but I know a lot about it. And I
gotcha.
also had the opportunity to study traditional polygamy in different parts of Africa as well as Papua New Guinea.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I mean, I know they mentioned that it's in the Bible, and so people, I guess feel like because it's in there, X, Y, and Z, I guess it's fair game and all of that. So, I mean, we're familiar with
Oh
it. I
yeah,
would think
then
the
you have
audience is
all the
familiar.
traditional, FLDS Mormons who very much believe that there's messages around having multiple wives.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And,
I mean,
if we actually look at the cultures of the world, close to 85% allow the practice of polygamy. In
mm,
terms of the numbers of people, because some of these cultures are really small, maybe
mm,
20% of the world population lives in a context where polygamy is allowed. No, actually, I'm sorry, it's about a third of the world population. And even within those communities and tribes and such, it's just the wealthiest 20% of the men who can afford multiple wives. And it's just a sprinkling of cultures which practice polyandry, where a wife can have multiple husbands.
mm. I was gonna say I know I joke every now and then, because I got a good guy friend or whatever, um, and then I am married and whatnot as well, and I'm like, oh, he's just husband number two, and whatnot. But I mean, yeah, you definitely don't hear much about the women having multiple. I mean, not that I'm
Yeah,
not saying I've never
except
heard, but you hear
within
more
the
about the men.
practice of polyamory, which is
Mm,
getting a lot of airplay recently. I think
mm,
New York Magazine had it as a cover story, and there's more and more folks that think about it and consider practicing it and may actually do it. And this is
mm.
a Western world practice where people consensually have multiple partners.
Yeah, no, people again, I guess it just goes with that free will that that I believe that God gave us or whatnot. And I ask God all the time, like, why did you give us that? I mean, look what we do. But but hey, I mean, again, I understand why, but at the same time, sometimes you still ask the questions or whatever. But I mean, well, what has your studies? What have you concluded from your studies? It seems like you've
Oh, what
taken a
have I
deep dive
concluded? Oh,
in.
that's such a fun question.
You've
So,
taken a deep dive
well,
into.
my worldview is very much conditioned by my training in anthropology,
Hmm,
where I ultimately practice something called cultural relativism, where we
hmm,
see the value of every culture's way and we try
hmm,
to get inside of it and respect how those people live their lives and what kind of beliefs that have led them to practice the things they do. And,
hmm,
some of the practices from an outsider sound pretty unusual. And they may not be things that all of us want to do.
hmm.
But nonetheless, I want to understand how all these things work. And actually, in writing my book, what spirited my first adventures in trying to figure it all out
Mm,
was being a young woman. I had just graduated from UC Berkeley in anthropology. I was like all of 22. And this was a long time ago. This was in the thick of the 1970s in Berkeley, where I don't know if any of your follow listeners and viewers know about all the things that the feminists were up to then. But they were publishing things like The Myth of the Vaginal Orgasm and claiming that the only way a woman could orgasm was through direct clitoral stimulation.
mm, mhm,
And this kind of challenged the whole thing that Freud had proposed much earlier, that the clitoral orgasm was something adolescents engaged, but a married woman who had intercourse with her husband would be able to orgasm through without direct clitoral stimulation, just through penetration.
mm, mhm,
And I, as a young woman, was very confused by this because I I had a boyfriend and I clearly couldn't orgasm when we had intercourse, but And I was in a women's support group. What in those days it was called a women's consciousness raising group. And I started asking the other females in the group, well, how do you orgasm? Or can you? Or have you discovered it? Or what? Where is it? Or how is it? Or because I knew I hadn't had it. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of them said, hey, if you place yourself in your bathtub and run a nice stream of warm water and place your crotch underneath it and just relax into that, you might be able to orgasm. So I
Hmm.
tried it. I lived in a house with all these other students. So I locked the bathroom door super tight, ran the water, and it worked. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, at least I figured that one out. And then I'm like telling my boyfriend, you got to see this. So I bring him in the next day. I bring him over to my house and bring him into the bathroom and lock the door tight. And he watches it. But we could never figure out how to achieve that together. Because,
Interesting.
we lived in despite how open our a little culture was, we had none of the practices that traditional people have in, let's say, Mangea in the South Pacific, because anthropologists get to study everything. And
Mm,
they discovered that the community believed that every woman or every female should be able to orgasm 100% of the time. And they train, and basically the way they achieved this is they knew how it worked.
hmm,
Excuse me. And they trained their adolescents through older folks who knew bodies how to do it. And so
hmm,
everyone, as they're of age to experience sexual energy, would be trained by an older member of their community. Now, we might call this abuse, pedophilia, whatever else, but in a
hmm,
community that celebrates people understanding their bodies and being able to achieve orgasm with a partner, they nailed it. And so I found that to be quite fascinating that
hmm,
we live in this country where we do not offer any direct sex education. Our sex education is often save your body for your husband, for a female. So, virginity before marriage, and that's the biggest gift you can give him, rather than understand your body, understand its vibrancy, know how it works, know how to communicate, know how to share information with each other so you can both have the best sexual encounters possible.
hmm. W- Well, there's definitely a lot there. I mean, I'm sure people again that may listen to this platform, they may not agree with anything you're saying right now, whatever case may be.
I'm sure they
You
don't.
know,
I mean, but here we
um,
are. We're two women on different sides of the country with
yeah,
different backgrounds, and we're having a conversation. And
exactly, exactly,
this
and
is America, and we can do that.
exactly, exactly. And I think, I mean, again, I think there's nothing wrong with again having the conversations and getting, an understanding and things of that nature. And again, it seems like you've taken a deep dive into again other cultures and things like that. To I guess experience what they had done and things of that nature. I think there is something to education or getting or learning, things that you like and things of that nature. Um,
Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
you
And
know.
so much of the sex education we've seen is more about health than
Mhm.
about pleasure. So it's, don't get pregnant until you're ready to have children. Um, don't pass STDs to each other. Um, those kind of things, and then certainly there's more stuff about consent and having folks be able to speak up for themselves
Mhm.
and, speak up if it doesn't feel right and not put up with pain. And
Mm.
a lot of females, have basically tolerated sex rather than enjoyed it because
Mhm.
for whatever was going on, it could be painful. Maybe they didn't know that it couldn't be. And
Mhm.
so they didn't know what their body was capable of. And they
Mhm.
didn't know what it took to be turned on enough to enjoy penetration.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's definitely quite interesting thing to think about because I mean, again, even though yes, I'm in agreement that we should learn or whatever, but at the same time, I'm trying to um find some uh or figure out how I feel personally about like who should be the one to teach. You know what I'm saying? And that along those lines, because unfortunately, I feel like at, from my own experience as well as other people that have been on this platform and whatnot, um, it seems like a lot of people are just learning by the doing or learning by the individuals that decide to introduce, for example, a child or whatever the case may be
Sure.
to the
And
thing.
that's basically
Um,
how we've learned is through
right. And
partners. And so think of somebody who only has had the partner they're married to. How are they going to learn if that person has also only had the partner they're married to? They might end up, trying to, read some books, watch some porn, do whatever they can to kind of find out a little more or talk to their friends. But, some of the messages in porn are more about performance and display than about reality. I mean,
mm,
how many women want the guy to squirt all over her face?
that
How
never
many women want to
was
be
appealing to
choked?
me. I'm sorry. What was the other
No, and
example?
so there's like stuff that people see in porn that they think everybody likes, or that's standard behavior, rather than it's a visual entertainment kind of thing.
Yeah, that's on a whole nother level. Just because I mean, we've had some like human trafficking survivors and whatnot have mentioned or come and visited us and let us know what they experience behind the scenes in regards to porn and whatnot, and how it seems that majority of those people aren't really consenting. It's more so like situations that they're being forced to do. So that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, it
And
is another conversation.
that's a whole but again, like what I was saying earlier about the way that I would say people are being introduced to sexuality and whatnot. Like I would think now, again, I didn't live this out and stuff, so I can't fully answer like what would a couple that haven't experienced anyone else but each other experience. But I think to me, I do believe that there's something beautiful about those two exploring together. Um, versus coming with the idea or coming with the porn in our mind or whatever the thing is to what we think it should be. Um, because but again, that comes back to I guess the whole platform here
Yeah, I
of
understand the
feeling
thing
like
about
God
wanting
gave
to
us this
explore
gift.
together. Because I know
Yeah.
as a young woman, I was overwhelmed by information I was hearing.
Mm.
And I was overwhelmed by guys who, acted like they knew everything. And I just wanted to be with somebody who was as innocent and as exploratory as I was. And I wanted us
Mm.
to just be able to figure out in our own way.
Mhm.
And, sometimes, we have such a pushy culture in terms of all
Yeah.
the toys that are out there and all the imagery that are out there and all the
Mhm.
anger and all the intensity that a young person may not appreciate all that. And it may
Mhm.
just overwhelm them. But, one of the things that had happened to me as a young woman is because feminism was so about women being in charge of their lives and making every choice they could to live an empowered life, that I knew nothing about surrender.
Mm.
And what I ended up finding myself doing, which was pretty interesting, was
Mhm.
when I graduated from college, I one of the things I had wanted to do was be an anthropologist and live in a little village
Mm,
and just understand and just live that anthropological life of living it with a community and getting to know everybody and just sort of taking in their worldview. So
mm,
I set off to go to Mexico because here in California, we're not that far from there. So I got a ride down and then started taking buses and eventually landed in a village or two. And I got to do some of that. The other thing, because I was just kind of on my own doing it however I did it, I also had the I don't know if you'd call it opportunity, but it was to meet Mexican men. And at that time, and this was like 1975, 76, um, there wasn't a lot of feminism in Mexico. There was a
mm,
lot of machismo, which we hear called male chauvinism. And
mm,
I'd never really, and I'd always been with these, I guess what we could call very respectful, kind of wimpy guys, and who were very controlled by feminism in
mm,
California. So here I am, a young, pretty girl in Mexico, and suddenly I'm getting hit on by all these very direct, very sexual men. And it was, a very much of my little learning experience because I had never had somebody just completely swarm me with their energy. I'd
mm,
always been with somebody who says, "Is this okay? Can I," all that kind of thing. But these guys
mm.
would just thrust their tongues in my mouth and grab me all over. And
Oh.
I liked it. I had no idea I liked to be dominated because I was so used to being in charge of everything and calling
Mm,
all the shots in my life. So,
mm-hmm.
that was some of my early field research was experiencing being submissive.
Mm. I mean, and I can't say every woman, right? But I think most of us like, for the man to take charge in one way or another,
Hmm.
and things of that nature. So I mean, I'm sure again, being in a new place and the type of people, all of that was probably very exciting or whatever.
Yeah.
I can,
Hmm.
So I mean, okay, if we go back a little bit, right? If we go back to um maybe before college or something like that. Like, what kind of set you on this path to the anthropology and then ultimately the
Oh, sure.
sexology?
So
Like,
when
what was
I
the
was
inspiration for
11
you?
years old,
Mm,
we had these SRA readers where you got to read little stories. And
mm,
one of the stories I read was about an anthropologist who
okay.
got to live in other parts of the world. And I
Um,
was in a very, kind of predictable community, Palo
mm,
Alto, and
okay.
I wanted to see everything else. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, and so that became my dream. No, it's kind of interesting because when I was even younger, my dream was to be an astronaut because I thought that's how you got to see everything and
Mm,
you got to see the universe. And so as a little kid, I would draw pictures of spaceships with all the different stages on them. And that's, what I thought. But then at 11 years old, I find out about anthropology and I become convinced that that's what I want to do. And
mm,
as for how I got interested enough in sex as a topic and not just as a, you know, wanting to, have a
an
reasonable sex
experience.
life
Yeah.
was probably because I waited so long to lose my virginity. I was studying everything. I was
Mm,
asking everyone. I was
mm-hmm.
reading everything. When
Mm-hmm.
I was a young teen, I'd go to the library and how do you, as a kid in those days, you don't go to the librarian and say, "Do you have any books on sex?" It was just like you're way too embarrassed, and they didn't have an internet then where you could do your own research.
Mm-hmm.
So I would find these books by an anthropologist named Oscar Lewis, who had studied Mexican village women And he reported all these details about how they manage their bodies and their sexuality. And
Hmm.
I would hide in the library stacks where nobody could find me. And I would just be reading this stuff, trying to make sense of it. And then
Mm.
I'd be, watching folks who were, a little older than me, and they'd be on park benches making out. And I'd be watching everything they did. And I just like wanted to know it all, but I didn't know what questions to ask.
Mm.
And,
Mhm.
and then I remember I would ask my parents things, and they were, you know, they knew how to have fun, but they weren't about to. I didn't even know what to ask, but I remember once saying, "Hey, what is sex life like?" And I
Mm.
was, I think, in eighth grade, and we had to
Okay.
do our a homemaking assignment where we made dinner for our family. And so
Mm.
I made this orange chiffon pie.
Mm.
And my dad said it's as good as that pie.
Oh, okay. So was it a good pie or?
It was a good pie. So I started out with very high hopes for having it be good. I mean, I had no reason why it shouldn't be. And so I waited until was sure I was with somebody that I really liked and that we were communicating well. I mean, there had been obviously times before then when someone, tried to push me, and I would say, no, hey, I'm a virgin. I'm waiting until it's really the right time for me. So I think that's some of my story is that I waited a long time.
Mhm.
I was a researcher. I was like trying to find out as everything I could so I could do have as good experience as I could.
Mm. Mhm. That's interesting. Do Well, I guess if I like share a little of my story, which I know people on my platform already know, like I feel like my curiosity or my desire and all that type of stuff was, I believe it all stemmed from again being introduced at that early age to kissing and touching and things like that by the babysitter and whatnot. Like I feel like from there, then my it just kind of kept going and going and going up until now that hey, I got a whole platform called God, Sex, and Love. You know what I mean? Um, so I mean, in that. So, are you saying for you, it's kind of just the natural curiosity, just kind of led you to ask these questions, or
Yeah, because I was
what?
just a natural born researcher. It's the
Mm,
funniest thing. I have this picture of myself in nursery school where I am sitting there watching and just looking at everything and not
mm,
engaging. Just all the other kids are being held by their parents or doing something, and I'm just staring at what's going on. And
mm,
I mean, this fly on the wall thing has just been
mm,
part of my personality forever.
mhm,
And, I'm a good writer, but the same time, I'm actually kind of, I don't always know how to, you know, ask for what I want, but I know how to watch.
okay.
And I have a partner right now, and he was like, how come you don't say more what you want? And I'm just like, I'm just, hey, you'd think I knew what I wanted because I'm a good writer, but I'm
Mm,
altogether a submissive, quiet person. And
mm,
you actually have to ask me things too. You can't just expect me to always speak up.
mm. Yeah, I mean, well, hey, different personalities. So the book, then. So what has inspired the book? What would
Hmm.
you like to share with us about your
Sure. Well,
latest
I
endeavor?
realized that I came up with the idea of this book 15 years ago.
Hmm.
And I had been a professor of anthropology, teaching courses like gender, sex, and culture, sexual anthropology, things where we, study other cultures and study other ways. And one of the things I was doing with my students was inviting them, and this was absolutely an optional assignment, to write their sex history,
Hmm.
whatever they, and I was trying to make sex a much bigger um discussion than just who you'd had intercourse with, but all the messages you got from your family, from your church, from your synagogue, from friends, from the internet, whatever it was, all the things that contributed to how you engage the world as a sexual being. Still, most of my students only wrote about who they'd had intercourse with. And and so I thought, God, how I this is a really good assignment. Let me do it. So I began to write mine. And that's when I faced that I'd always been a researcher. I
Hmm.
was always trying to see the bigger picture. I was always trying to put things in context. It wasn't enough just for me to figure out how orgasm worked, but I had to figure out what was going on with everybody else. Why were they writing these books? Why were they having these discussions? Why
Hmm.
was this working and that not always working? And
Hmm.
so I began to write this book, it and then at some point I started inviting folks over my house to hear chapters, and some of them were my students, and some of the chapters were really intense because I wrote about having been raped. I
Hmm.
wrote about you know intense, unusual things that happened to me.
Hmm.
And it was kind of like I was freeing myself from these intense stories by sharing them and
Hmm.
getting really good responses.
Hmm.
So then, at some point, I just got really interested in traveling, and I was able to go to Africa quite a few times. I was able to go to New Guinea. I was able to go to India. I was able to go all over Mexico and South America. It was just like I was blessed with being a really good travel planner and saving my airline miles and finding out this and that, being able to travel to all these places. And, it would turn out I'd ask people questions. And one of the things that when I was in India, I was traveling with a girlfriend, and we were in a women's only train car. And the women were very candid with each other. And at that time in India, which was 2007, so I guess about 17 years ago, they were very anxious about arranged marriage versus love marriage. Now, here in the Western
Hmm.
world, we only marry the folks that we feel that we're in love with. Where in India and many parts of the Middle East and other places as well, arranged marriages are standard. And in fact,
Hmm.
my grandparents back in the day were in an arranged marriage. And
Oh,
so
wow.
and that's not uncommon for in many places. So
Hmm.
these women were saying, well, does a love marriage actually work? Because, like in a love marriage, your family doesn't weigh in. They don't really do research on the other family.
Hmm.
It's just, your hormones that are telling you want to be with this person and nothing else. And so we had endless discussions with women in train cars about, what they believed, what kind of a marriage they were in. And everybody was just so forthcoming. It was just amazing. And I remember I went to some cell phone shop, and there weren't that many cell phones in India at the time. And the woman at the shop, I said I needed a little help with my phone, and she provided the help. And then she says, "Would you come in the back room and have tea with me?" And I said,
Mm,
"Sure." And there she starts popping the questions. Do you think love marriage works? And,
mm,
I was pretty honest with her. I says, you won't have your family's support if it's not working well. In an arranged marriage, the family is so into um, making it work because they vetted the other family and they are creating an alliance and they're all going to be family together.
mm,
Without their support, you're really on your own. And because here in the Western world we're so on our own, we have had a lot of divorce because nobody was trying to help us work it out.
mm, mm,
So those were, some of the many adventures I had. I got to live in a little village in Kenya where everyone was involved in polygamy and or polygyny, where a husband and multiple wives. And
mm,
I would, and a couple young folks were off of college at that point, so they were my translators, and they would set up interviews where every day I'd go to another woman's house and or a man or a family house and discuss with them about how it was working out. And it was so funny. At one point, we started having folks saying, "Hey, you haven't interviewed us yet." And so I was like, and then it was really funny because, I would do this interview. And then when we'd leave the interview, my interviewers who knew everybody said, "They lied to you. They told you this, and it wasn't really the case."
Oh
And
no.
so that was like even better because then I would like have the backstory of what really happened. Because like some woman would say, "Oh, everything's fine. We have no problems. I totally get along with everyone." And then she'd say, her husband threw her out. She had to marry someone else. All kinds of stories that they would never tell me because I
Mm,
was, they were just sort of doing a light, simple story. And talking through translators, it's very hard to get the real story.
mm.
And it's mostly you get the story by living with people, not by, interviewing them
Interviewing.
like that.
Yeah.
So, I absorbed all kinds of information more from just finding out what everybody was talking about. Because they were like trying to marry off a girl who was maybe all of 14 to a much older man. And I was
Mm,
saying, like, what's going on? And I says, well, the family thinks they can get a lot of money because there's a bride price and they're going to get, this substantial thing. And then the girl was like really upset, and people in the community were like, what are you doing to her? That is so disrespectful. And so I'd hear all this kind of stuff. And then I'd
mm,
hear stories of co wives that really didn't get along with each other and didn't want, and that would be fighting and that would be keeping the husband extra nights because they were supposed to rotate the husband. And so it's kind of like the interviews were just window dressing for me, for them seeing that I was like trying to, study things. But the real things I studied or learned were from living there and having candid conversations with people who had issues. Like there
mm,
was a woman whose husband died, and they were trying to force her to marry his older brother because they wanted to keep the kids and the family in the community. And
mm,
so the best way to keep the kids in the family was to have her marry the older brother. It's a traditional practice in many tribal situations,
mhm.
but she wasn't into the older brother. She wanted to have her own life. And they basically said, if you want to have your own life, you give us the kids and you can go.
Wow.
And so
Mm,
those were the kinds of things I was able to absorb by actually living there and not just, asking questions.
got you, got you. Well, I mean, I know that sounds like amazing and everything. I know people are going to be asking questions about the title. So where did the
Where
title
did
of the
that
book
title
come
come
from?
from? Let
Yeah,
me
are
tell
they gonna
you.
be like, is that what
Is
she's
that
saying?
true? Okay, so
Yeah.
basically, this is what happened. Um, it right before the pandemic, like around 2018 or something, I decided I'd taught enough college. I was really tired of competing with the cell phones because
Mm,
everyone was texting and doing Snapchat and doing Instagram and whatever they were up to, and they were getting such a response, like the moment a text or response came in, they were excited, they got a dopamine hit, and listening to their professor lecture just didn't crack it for them. Their phone was so much more interesting, and I was so tired of competing with the phones.
mm,
So um and I used to be able to show a half-hour video to my students. They did not have the attention span for more than 20 seconds, and then they were up for something else. So
mm,
I just thought the whole medium of college, the way I was lecturing and doing classes, was just not working. So
mm,
I just decided, hey, I looked at my pension and I said, hey, I think I can swing this. So I retired. And then it's like, well, what do you do with all this free time? When your brain is still good, you're still healthy. Well, I decided I'd join a writing group and try to finish that book I'd started 9 years ago. So
mm,
I joined this writing group, and everybody was a hair older than me and had lived much more circumspect lives. They had not grown up in Berkeley in the 1970s. They had not been curious enough to travel to all these remote places. They certainly weren't going to ha- allow themselves to be hit on by aggressive Mexican men. I mean, some of them were actually in arranged marriages. One of them had married her high school sweetheart. And so they just thought I was a whack job. And I knew every time I'd read one of my stories or chapters, they would just be rolling their eyes like, where did she come from? And so one day I just thought, I know they're just trying to figure out what the number is. So I made up a number to quiet them down. And the numbers, may be accurate, maybe not. But I liked the number. And I called my next essay 177 Lovers and Counting. And that quieted them down. But then the leader booted me out of the group for being too provocative.
Oh my. Well. Oh goodness.
And then I was in a storytelling group. I wanted to do performance storytelling. I
Oh
thought
really?
that would be a nice, fun thing to do because I wasn't lecturing like 5 nights a week. I needed some audience. And I
Mm,
was in this group again with older folks who had not grown up as I had. And they booted me out of that group too. Because they just said I was like, I always thought it was actually a really funny thing that had happened.
mm,
Some guy who had lived with me for a while and had left all his stuff when he had left stuff when he moved because he
mm,
just had so much stuff. And one of the things he left was what he called a sex bench. And this was basically a sawhorse that he and some partner of his had made that they padded it. And so I just wanted to get rid of it. And I didn't need it in my yard. And he had never used it with me, and I'd never asked to use it. It was not really my deal. But
mm,
nonetheless, there's this sex bench in my yard, and he's long gone. And so this group had this thing where you could bring in an item and tell a story about it, and then somebody else could take it home. So I brought in the sex bench and I mounted it. And I just said, this is probably how it was used. And and I told the story of how I'd never used it with him. But they just thought I was like being impossibly provocative, that I was offending people, and so they booted me out of their group. And a young woman who was more of an assistant to the leader, she said, "I'll take it."
What?
So so basically, all I can say is I must be intergenerational because I didn't exactly fit in with some of these older folks, but
Mm,
I nonetheless do have a good community. And in doing interviews with folks like yourself, I'm trying to expand my community so that more people can find out about my book. My book is actually a textbook. And it's a textbook for anthropology and sexology and psychology and sociology classes. Because in beyond my story, it has all kinds of contextual information on, like for example, when I start having intercourse for the first time, it's the year that Roe versus Wade became the law of the land, 1973. So I end up writing all about the history of abortion and how there was abortion in the Middle Ages, that the and it was considered absolutely legal before that you could feel the baby moving, before what's called quickening, to have an abortion.
mm,
No questions. And also, the main reasons people would have abortion had to do with parentage. And if someone had had an affair with a wealthy person, that the potential child could claim the right to inherit. And because they didn't want to pass their wealth on to this child that wasn't someone who was their wife's child, they arranged abortions. And it's only in very recent times that we've become, at least some members of the political world, have become obsessed with the rights of the unborn. This is a really new concept. So this is some of the
mm,
stuff I talk about, is everything I discuss has context. So, I'm discussing the the clitoral system, that the clitoris, when I'm just learning about orgasm and clitorises and whatever, and then eventually we talk about the G spot. We talk about the research of Beverly Whipple, who's a sexologist who did all kinds of research on that. So everything that my story engages gets put into a very large context. So curious people can find out a lot more than just my little story.
well, I mean, I appreciate you coming and sharing with us and everything like that. And I mean, I hope that you at least felt welcomed here, with all the places that
I
you've
was
been kicked
totally
out of.
welcome. Yeah, and your listeners can pick up the book on Amazon. We also the publisher offers a discount, which when I found out with tax and um shipping is about the same price as the Amazon price, but nonetheless I can give you the discount code. Or, folks want to get it as an ebook, definitely we can give you a discount on that. And I'd say, my reviewers called it a page turner and they thought it was an amazing book. So I encourage your community to take a look.
Well, I appreciate again you and your time. Congratulations again on your book and I guess
Thank
all
you.
of your studies and your doctorates and all the amazing things. And did you share your social media and things like that if people want to get in touch with you?
Oh, sure. My I'm on Facebook as Leanna Wolfe. Um,
Mm,
I have a website called wisewomansexandrelationshipconsulting.com. And
mm,
my book is, as I said, on many, many platforms. They just need to Google 177 lovers and counting. And my publisher is Roman and Littlefield. So that's how to track it down. So there you have it.
Awesome. Is there anything else you would like to share with us before you go? Like maybe, I don't know, stuff we need to look out for you or whatever you would like.
Oh,
Feel
well,
free.
I'm giving some talks at conferences that are coming up, but I think this show is going to air after the conferences. So,
Oh.
but the other thing I did want to say, and who knows what is going to come of this, is I launched my book here in Los Angeles, I guess about 2 weeks ago. It's a new book, um, through doing a solo theater show. So
Mm.
I called the solo show by the same name. I took out I drew from about a tenth of what's in the book and created a theater piece. I got a
Mm.
lot of help from folks who know more about theater than I do. My
Mm.
basic training was in being a professor, and so I knew how to be up in front of an audience and I knew how to make people laugh, but
Mm.
I didn't know all the things of structuring a play. And so
Mm.
the play came off really well. We sold out, and
Nice.
I'm bringing it to the Hollywood Fringe Festival in June, and
Mm.
I'm hoping to have a second life as an actor.
Oh, okay. Listen, well, let us find out all the amazing things you got going on. But that's really cool. I could definitely, like when you were saying earlier, I could kind of see that. I don't know, is the bench part of it?
That
'Cause I
bench is
mean,
long gone,
that
and
might
I
be a
would
nice
never,
thing.
I don't have a big motivation to use the bench, but I can well imagine how to use it.
Uh, well, I mean, and
I
it's a
mean,
one
I'm
woman
willing to
show.
try anything or many things once, but there's research and then there's what you actually like.
Understood. Yeah. So, is it a one woman show?
Yeah, it's a one woman show.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
we're going to be putting it up on Vimeo. It's needing a little edit, just the way, everything does. And
Oh,
I will send you the link when we're up on Vimeo, because you might
awesome.
enjoy it and your listeners might enjoy it too.
Awesome. Well, please do. And like I said, congratulations on all of your endeavors and thank you so much for visiting.
You're so welcome. A pleasure.
Just wishing I would have a one night affair.
Thank you so much for watching the GSL Talk Show, and thank you to Miss Leanna for joining us tonight. I hope that you guys enjoyed this conversation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and check out her book, show, and all the rest of her endeavors. Have a good night.